there you are again, and here I am. This is Dick Foth with Stories from the Road. We're in the middle of February almost, and as we approach Valentine's Day, I had this thought. Why don't we do a couple of podcasts that focus on the heart of what love really looks like and how it works? A few weeks ago, I had the chance to sit with my friend Brad Formsma, brought up in Michigan, now from California, who leads an enterprise, a wonderful movement, if I could call it that, called I Like Giving. Giving is at the heart of what it means to love. So these next two podcasts will focus on our conversation. Well, here we are again. This is Dick Foth. And back in the 1970s, for 9 years, I had a radio program, 10 minutes on a Saturday morning in Illinois, East Central Illinois, on CBS affiliate, and it was called Wake Up and Live. And this is between Sports Scoreboard and Charles Osgood's News Break on CBS. And many Saturday mornings, I would come up to the microphone and say, "Top of the morning to you. This is Dick Foth, and it's time to wake up and live." So that's how we're starting this in Stories from the Road. Once in a while in our lives, we get to meet individuals who, because of their focus, because of their enthusiasm, but because of their joy, they sort of captivate you. And I want you to meet one of those today. And it's been some years since I first met Brad Formsma, but he leads an enterprise, leads a vision, if I could put it that way, called I Like Giving. So we're going to just take this time and talk about that theme, that idea, that vision that you have captured and built a platform for encouraging people with. Every English teacher grits their teeth when I say "with" at the end, but it's okay. It's all right. So just answer my favorite question, if you wouldn't mind. I almost always start this way. Where was home for you originally?
Well, thank you for asking, and thank you for teaching me that question. So I was brought up, not raised, yes, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so the first 43 years of our lives, that's where we lived.
In California is where you live now. Talk to me about just a couple of things about your growing up years, just as a kid. Mm-hmm.
So I'm the oldest of five.
Okay.
So, Dick, when I was about 10, I was mowing the lawn. Mom pulled in the driveway in their old Chevy, or it was old to me at the time.
Sure.
And she showed me a grainy picture of what I soon learned was an ultrasound. It was the fall, and she quickly explained that while she thought she was having baby number 4, she was, but she was also having baby number 5. So my dad said, Pete and repeat are coming. And that really set my upbringing to change big, because we went from 3 to 5, and immediately I'm in this world of the house is upside down. My parents are amazing, but I mean that's a big shift.
And you're the firstborn.
And I'm the firstborn, so it came in handy later in life when we've had our firstborn. I knew how to change a diaper.
There you go.
But I tell you that because I was looking for ways to escape as these guys got 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 months old, and I found a way out.
What's that?
And the way out was I had a grandpa who had a commercial baking company, and then he had a special test kitchen next to his office. And on Saturdays, he'd go and make 16 special loaves of bread. And I thought, there it is. I'll tag along with him. I can get out of the house. So I sold him pretty hard on picking me up on those Saturday mornings, and we'd go get those loaves baked. And my job was to check and make sure when they cool down that the bag and the little plastic spinner was ready to go. So he was all about efficient. And then into this trunk he'd go with these, well, let me say it like this. And then those loaves of bread, now 16 of them, They would just go on that big tray in the trunk, and we'd head out, and he would go all over our city to different relationships that he had, maybe a widow from church that he knew was having a bad week, and he'd bring that fresh loaf of bread, he'd squeeze it in her face. You can kind of smell it right now, get that squeezing motion. And then he would just say kind, encouraging words. And we'd get in the car and go to somebody else. And then there might be a loaf of white bread and a white envelope that I'd learn later had a check in it. And he said, oh, they had a financial need. So gave him a little bread and a little more bread. He thought that was funny. And then maybe another stop would be a letter of recommendation. He just started modeling for me kind of this life of giving that included money but went farther. He'd share stuff. It was just quite a modeling. Very little words, but boy, what did I watch this happen.
What was his name?
Don
Roskam.
Roskam.
So the weekend piece was in addition to his commercial thing that he would do during the week, and that's where you got your start.
I never saw a recipe. This guy would just do it by feel. And he would just kind of finesse it. And usually, Dick, there was like 2 little mini loaves, maybe 3. He kind of overshot it, the 16, just enough. And those got to be mine.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were just so good. So good. But that was the beginning. Now, here's what's important. And I want to be honoring the time, but we moved across town, and then something tragic happened. My dad was busy, and he worked a lot, and God bless him for that, but a bad guy came along and kind of wooed me into working for him, and that turned into some really dark, abusive years. And, you know, your innocence is stolen and all this. And he saw a work ethic in me, and he exploited that along with the dad who was working all the time. And so I began to be bitter towards God. I had kind of prayed some early prayers, but, you know, then this tragic, life-changing thing happens. And it's just horrible, and lots of threats. He was wealthy, he was influential. So it's just a dark, dark season. The time would go on. I got married and got into the landscaping business, and I found I liked money. I liked to make it. I didn't really like to give it until I turned 28, and our first son came into the world, and we did a little private family dedication, as you do with blessing a kid or whatever you call it then. And I told the pastor, do it nice, make it good, I'll pay you. He said, we don't really, charge for these things. This is kind of what we do here at church. And I was a really good make-believer. I had all this in my head from upbringing and from Christian school. But I walked out of that dedication because that pastor only talked for 2 minutes, and I had to burp up all this Christianese. We want Dan to grow up in a Christian home, and we want all these. And I walked into the hallway. I can still see it like I'm looking at you, like just the other day. There I am in that narthex, and I get this, you got to accept or reject. We can't keep doing this phony
dance.
And I went home, and I prayed something like, Lord, have your way with me. I know that's not one of the normal scripted altar calls, but everything began to change. And here's what's significant. All those seeds planted from Grandpa, and he would bring scripture at times into things. It was like those seeds were just dormant. Bam! I get right with God, and before you know it, I'm like thinking about giving. And previous to that, I was thinking about spending and accumulating. And so I always say to parents and grandparents, don't give up on teaching that giving message. You might not see any fruit for a while, but boy, I think those seeds, they're strong and they can lay dormant for a while. Yeah. So the lights really went on quick, man.
I think that point about encouraging parents, grandparents, even great-grandparents to plant seeds. You're planters in a real way. I'm listening to you, remembering a conversation I had over a dinner table at our home in Falls Church, Virginia, years ago now, probably 25 years ago, with the ambassador from Norway. We had met at a little breakfast meeting, and we invited him over. His name was Knut Vollebæk. And I was asking him his story, and he said, I used to get up, I think it was on the weekends, with my grandfather. And his grandfather, I think, was either a butcher or what they used to call a greengrocer. And he said he would take me with him around town to make those deliveries, as he put it. And just that fact of going and serving and doing shaped Knut Vollebæk in his own spiritual journey, just like you're talking about, just that same kind of sort of fingerprints, fingers on your soul sort of thing. Now you're not a landscaper anymore, right? You left that when?
So in 2005,
right.
I was on a run and I was doing something, and I know we're not videoing this. I'm smiling as I was saying. Yes. I prayed one of those dangerous prayers of, was reading a book on the Holy Spirit, which, I had grown up Christian Reformed. So there was this kind of idea in my head that God was good and Jesus had died for my sins. Be careful with the Holy Spirit, because if he might send you to Africa.
Wild card. Yeah. Who knows,
Yeah, in the words of our friend Batterson, wild goose chase, comes to mind. But I was on a run on a natural beauty road in Michigan in May of 2005, and everything was going perfect. I had this beautiful home, wonderful kids, life's good, neat business in the city, and I prayed this prayer like, Lord, what would you have me do? There's something unsettling in my gut here. I can't... And I got this internal impression of, hey, I'm going to use you to encourage people in their giving. And it'll lead to other people having greater hope and joy in their life. And it'll all be based on my word, better to give than receive. And that's all I got. And I went home and put that in the journal. And I'm like, I don't even leave for spring vacation. How in the world could you do something out of little old Ada, Michigan? But it wasn't long after that, that I just began to realize that he was calling me to start conversations and create content to get people to think about the generous life, and not just think about it, but put it into action.
Mm-hmm. So let me give you a scenario. I had the privilege of doing this once. I went to a place where they help young people go into mission things, and it's very focused and very. And I asked them something like this question. So I'm on a bus, pick a town, any town. It can be wherever, in Bulgaria or in Thailand or wherever. Houston. I'm on a bus, and you get on. And I have 3 minutes before my next stop. And you want to start a conversation with me that has to do with giving. How do you start such conversations about giving?
Well, I mean, I'm laughing as you're talking because I just went to this story, right? Only you has story better than me. I mean, I love how you do story. Your life is a story. Your new work is story driven. And I feel like I've just followed some of that adventure with you, and I love it. I also love how much Jesus told stories.
Yeah.
So here goes a story. A number of years ago, I had to go to Canada when we lived in Michigan. I got to the border. Right. The guy said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm come to talk about giving." He says, "What's that?" I said, "See that car over there paying the toll to get?" I said, "If I gave them money, then they could go across." And he goes, "Oh, that, go ahead." And I thought, well, maybe it's not that simple, and kind of a silly story. But I would say, if I had to ask somebody a question, sometimes I'll say, if I want to have this conversation,
sure,
what does giving mean to you? And you get, it gives money, and then here comes the follow-up. I don't have enough of it, or, I got too much of it. I just write a check and move on.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And you hear that from kids or adults.
Just to be asked a question out of the blue about giving is, I think a fascinating thing anyway, because usually we say, so where are you from, or are you going to whatever? But the way you ask questions, or just your demeanor, you have this easily approachable personality, and so people, I think, would naturally respond to you. Did you ever ask anybody a question about giving and they say, or I don't want to talk, or generally they respond to you?
Well, I'm back to your example of the bus, or for me, really the airplane would probably be like the current one. What I find is the power of observation in our lives.
Okay.
So I'm getting on a plane, and I do a lot of things because I've tried to grow and hone the giving muscle, which, we talk about the 7 ways. Be generous with your time and your attention and your words and your influence and your money and how you share your stuff, right? So you put all that together and you got things to do every day if you want to play. So if I got on a plane and I just happened to notice it, Grandpa used to say, get your antenna working. There's all sorts of ways you can do for other people.
This is the bread, Grandpa.
Yeah. So here we are, somebody's getting on, and invariably somebody's having a struggle getting a bag into overhead bin.
Right.
And sometimes I'll give out of selfish motive, like I don't need that 40-pound bag that they jammed full of stuff coming down on my head. Hey, can I help you with that? Sure. But other times it comes out of 100% pure motivation.
There we go.
And I help, that will draw more conversation than me looking to start a conversation about, hey, what do you think about giving?
Sure.
It will be, boy, you just don't see that.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? And sometimes I'll say, I'm so glad you asked me. That's somebody's grandma. That's somebody's mom. I think I kind of saw my wife and my mom. Well, I would hope somebody would step in.
Yeah, I find that with opening doors.
Yeah.
When you open doors for people, especially it's for older people, and I'm one of them. I open the door and she will say, well, thank you very much. And I say, well, I think it'd make my mother proud. Which is a variation on what you're talking about.
Another one of my tricks is, I love Southwest Airlines for our videos of books that Susanna, your daughter, helps us create, and then I get to go out and try to figure out how to market them and get them to the world. Sure. She said something to me the other day that was so great. She's like, we can write these great kids books, but somebody's got to get them in front of people. That's hard. And I said, yeah, thanks for reminding me. But I had it where I'll bring a prepackaged, don't bring your homemade biscuits to a flight attendant. Yeah. But if it's prepackaged gummies or Snickers, they kind of work their way around the cabin. Yeah. They're all enclosed. And that people notice that. And then you see, you just, by the way, I'm Dutch, so I'll buy it maybe some of them at Walmart the day before the trip.
You wouldn't get them at the airport
not $19 gummies at the airport.
Yeah.
But if I'm feeling spendy, maybe, and I'll sit down and somebody will go, hey, I saw what you did. What'd you see? No, that made me feel good. Why'd you do that? I said, well, it's fun. I said, have you noticed how people are kind of grumpy when they fly? I said, this is the fastest way to be a happy flyer. Because, God created us to do this. Yeah. Our friend Mark Batterson says you can get on a plane. He says he can change the atmosphere by smiling. I don't know what else he's doing. I've never flown with him, but I think I've been known to smile.
So I have a friend, and he doesn't remember telling me this story. Okay. but I didn't hear it from anybody else. He's big. He's 6'8". Wonderful guy. And he was in Japan, and he was taking the train from Narita Airport to Tokyo. It's a very long, and they have pushers in Japan where they cram you on the train and stuff. And so he's cheek by jowl, as we would say in my British colonial days growing up. We're crammed in, and he's towering over everybody, and they're all serious. And he carries a harmonica in his pocket. And he said he just reached into his pocket and started playing "It's a Small World After All." And all of a sudden, people start coming alive and singing this thing just in that gift, the gift of a song, a kid song, right in the middle. I love this. I love you just telling stories about this. But you took this. I mean, I know hundreds of people who are generous. I know hundreds of people who give and do the things like you. But not all of them say, well, I think I'll give my whole life to that and start a charitable organization and exercise and so where did that transpire in time and place?
Yeah, so the calling or that moment in 2005, and then in 2007 sold this smaller landscaping business. It was the fourth largest in the city,
right? But
I always say smaller because it wasn't like I got $20 million and hey, let's pick something fun to do, like talk about generosity.
Yeah.
I have a friend who said to me one day, I want to help you. I want you to look at your life and look for themes and then pick 6 words. And we're going to spend the next month kind of creating a statement for your life. And what we came up with was entrepreneurial spirit, life, passion is giving. And we went way back to when I was 7 or 8 years old, collecting cans, and then what I like to think and dream about today, and living and teaching the generous life, the way Jesus would have us talk about it. So for me, I thought, man, what do entrepreneurs do? They find things that are missing or fix things that are broken. And what was missing to me was a succinct way to tell a story based on a biblical principle in a way that would make somebody go, oh, I might not go buy somebody bikes, and I can tell you that story, but it got me to do something else, because I think that generosity inspires generosity. And so it's a great teacher, which we know, right? Jesus was the great teacher. So he was always using stories. Mm-hmm. So that's how it got started. And so we started with short videos. And remember the days back when we called it Vimeo, and we would have this terrible word come up called buffering. Oh, It would just, kill me now. I mean, it's just loading. You'd get right at the great spot of the story, and then it would buffer. You're going to do that to me? And then a little more, And so that's how we started. And so a lot of video content wasn't out there, and that went crazy across the globe. That just around the globe, people like these I Like Giving short videos that we produced with excellence. And that's how we started. Let's inspire people to live generously. And then as the years have gone on, a publisher came along and said, you've got these great stories, let's put them in a book. And that was a moment, because I said, you need to know I cheated in high school English, and so I don't think I'm your guy. And they said, no, we can help people like you. And then I started thinking about all these other authors, and I'm like, did they cheat in high school English too? I don't know. Funny enough, a few years ago in Holland, Michigan in the summer, I was in a bookstore. And I came around the aisle, and I bumped into my English teacher, and she goes, Brad Formsma, what are you up to? I took a big deep breath. I said, Mrs. DeMeester, I wrote a book. And she fell into the bookshelf.
Of course she did.
And she said, yeah, you're a funny guy. And I said, no, I did.
And the book is called
I Like Giving.
I Like Giving.
Yeah.
And it's a compilation
of 44 short stories. Yeah, 44 short stories of people, they're not all my stories,
sure,
who are doing things for other people, wrapped around these 7 ways. Certainly not all about money, and not all from people with wealth, some that had very little, some with kids. And then I address other topics like sometimes giving's messy. Yeah. And you could ask me a messy giving story, and then I'd have to tell you. But, I don't want to take too much time.
Let me ask one other thing before I ask you the messy giving story. Say again the 7 ways.
Yes.
So I and your listeners out here can hear it again.
Yeah.
We got to hear it 7 times.
So they're generosity of thoughts, generosity of words, time, attention, influence, how we share our belongings, and money. And so when we take those 7 ways, and I'm just going to say them again because I want to make sure I didn't leave one out and they can edit that. So the 7 ways of living generously are thoughts. Use a thought in my mind to think something kind. Words. We can build somebody up or we can tear somebody down. Our influence, how we share our friendships. I look at how I got to meet Mark. It's because of you. I think that's how that worked. Generosity of money. I mean, that's important, but I can't give big checks every day.
Sure.
And then what about generosity of attention? I kind of wish I left that one out. That's a struggle for me. I've got this phone pulling at me, dinging. But boy, we know what it's like when we're fully present with somebody, don't we?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the belongings. We have different ways that we, I'm not telling you what of yours to share, but I come from this belief that what we have is a gift from God and it's kind of His. So how do I share?
Sure.
So that kind of covers those 7 ways. And, of course, time is in there. And we all have, that's the great equalizer, right?
Sure.
Everybody gets 168
every
week.
Every week. Do you know, I'm sure you do, let me just say it. Do you know the name David Brooks?
Yes.
Okay, David Brooks is a New York Times contributor and has written books and very thoughtful. He's on PBS News on, I think it's Friday night some. But he wrote a book last year called How to Know Someone or How to Know a Person. And his thesis is that you start getting to know a person by paying attention, by gazing on them, right?
Wow.
Which is who can't do that, right? And it's interesting in Scripture, in the story of Jesus, how oftentimes it says, and he looked on him, or in the Acts, Peter and John going up to the temple, and there's this lame guy, and he's asking for money, alms, and of course, if you've been in that culture in those years, and even in these years, alms or giving things to people who are poor or downtrodden or homeless, whatever, is a big deal. And Peter, I think the text says this exactly. He looks at him and says, "Look at me," or "Look at us." That exchange. There's neuroscientists say that when you look at each other, that point of paying attention, you are reading each other's brains.
Wow.
So I'm looking at yours now, and you're looking at mine. It's very light reading, okay?
Now I'm learning something new.
That idea of what is it that you have to give. I've heard scores of messages in church times or camps or whatever of Moses standing in front of the burning bush. And Yahweh, Jehovah, says to him, "What do you have in your hand?" And this whole framework that you're describing, this matrix of 7 things, is essentially that question. What do you have in hand? What are you going to do with it? And are you going to hoard it? Going to keep it to yourself? Going to put your name on it? I don't know what you're going to do. So tell me about this And you can ask me any questions along the line. We were going to ask you about a messy giving story. Is it a long story?
No. I was, in Michigan at Bible study, and a guy came in from Nigeria, and he started joining the Bible study and raised his hand one day and said, I have a prayer request. I want a van. I've got 6 kids, and, I also want to go to the local prison and share my testimony. I'm an evangelist. And so a few of us got together and we thought, let's do We Like Giving, right? That's when you come together, and we got him a very nice used van, and I got in the middle of it, and we put some money together, paid for the insurance. His name was William. And a few months went by. We were in the bathroom and washing our hands. I said, "Hey, William, how's it going at the jail, the ministry, the van?" He said, "I haven't been able to get there." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I don't have a license." I said, "William, the things you take for granted."
Yeah.
He went on to explain that every time he would go down and take the test, and here he was working a little bit above minimum wage, cleaning the local library, that he kept getting failed. I said, "Well, can I go with you where you're getting your test?" Because of his language deal, he had to go to one of those third-party neon sign places. So I walked in, and I said, "Hey, how does a guy like William get a license?" "Oh, well, that's the 149 package." So I pulled out my credit card, and we swiped it, and 2 weeks later, William had his license. Now, look out for a green van. I don't know how good of a driver he is, but the point was that ended up taking about 7 more hours. I really cut the story down, but there were a lot of twists and turns. I just assumed he had a license.
Sure.
So sometimes it can get messy.
That's a great messy giving story. Well, wasn't that a fun start to a conversation? We will pick up the rest of it next podcast time, hopefully before Valentine's Day. And I just am stirred by what happens when people are generous with all the ways they can be generous. It's something that moves the spirit, isn't it? Well, thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for subscribing, and for so many of you who have reached out to pick up the audiobook on Audible or Amazon that we did some time back called Stories I Love to Tell. We're grateful. Hopefully the stories are encouraging your hearts. That's it for now. Dick Foth signing off. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.